Hello everyone, this is MC Deck Discussions and I'm Abi Small. And today's deck we're going to discuss is a Silk Aggression deck, which makes, by the way, my fourth aspect with her, so that only leaves the pink one, Pool, the Pool aspect. So once I do that, I'll have all five. So this will be the first one of the newest set of heroes. Well, I'll have all those done. I'm not sure when I'll do that one yet. All right, so this one's called Weaponized Web-Warrior, so that probably gives away a bit what we're going to be doing here. So why don't we get right to that part right away? So Silk already comes with her own weapon. So that is her Spider Claws. So you can see it's an upgrade weapon, 2 cost, has a physical resource, and has a hero interrupt when Silk makes a basic attack, exhaust Spider Claws. For this attack, she gets +1 ATK for each card tucked under her from the same encounter set as the attacked enemy. This attack gains piercing. Now, for me personally, I tend not to end up really using this too much other than to get through toughs. Though, of course, if you have the right cards tucked under her, you can get some extra attack out of her as well. But for the most part, this doesn't go as used as it could as other weapons. And note also, it does not have restricted on it. So if you take a look here, there's no restriction. So that means we can put in some other weapons that do have restrictions. So I've done that. And by the way, the purpose here is for firepower, so we'll get to that in just a little bit. So those other two upgrades that we added to here that are weapons, there's the plasma pistol. So it's a tech and a weapon. And notice it is restricted and it has 3 uses, 3 charge counters. It has a hero action, exhaust plasma pistol and remove one charge counter from it, deal 1 damage to an enemy. Notice that does not count as an attack. And then the other one is Yarnbjorn. So this one only costs 1, which is really nice. Asgard and weapon traits. This one's also restricted. So that's 3 weapons altogether in the deck, 2 of which are restricted. You're allowed to have up to 2 restricted weapons, 2 restricted cards in play, So that being the case, you could have all 3 of these weapons out in play at the same time. And it has this response: after your hero attacks an enemy, spend a physical resource, deal 2 damage to an enemy. So notice this one does not have to be exhausted. So the other 2 weapons have to be exhausted. This one does not. So that means even if this is exhausted, which will come in to be important in a little bit here, even if this is exhausted, you can still do this. Whenever your hero attacks, so that could be their own attack themselves or with any of their events that attack, then you can spend a physical resource and deal 2 damage to an enemy. So that brings us to firepower. So this is what we added to the deck here, or a big important piece that we were kind of centering those around. And it's 1 cost event, and it's an attack, has a hero action, exhaust up to 3 weapon upgrades you control. For each weapon upgrade exhausted this way, choose an enemy and deal 3 damage to it. This attack gains range, which means you do not have to worry about retaliation. So if the villain or any enemy has retaliate, you don't have to worry about those when you do these attacks. So, let's go back to that card again. So notice it's for each weapon upgrade exhausted, choose an enemy and deal 3 damage to it. So you could do 3 damage to one enemy, 3 damage to another enemy, and 3 damage to another, or you could focus all of it in just one enemy. So that's a total. If we have, we can exhaust up to 3 of them. So this can deal 3, 6, or 9 damage altogether, all of them having ranged. All right. So that is a lot of firepower for just 1 cost. Of course, really, there's an upfront cost that you have to have at least 1 of your weapon upgrades in play to begin with to be able to do at least that first 3 points of damage. But once you get 1, 2, or 3 of those out, it immediately starts to be cost effective as soon as you have 1 of them out. And if you have all 3 of them out, then it's also cost effective. In addition, these weapons have some uses even before you even have them. So the cool thing about firepower is you can play that and exhaust. Let's say you have all 3 of these out, you exhaust Yarnbjorn and the other 2, you can afterwards still spend a physical resource and deal 2 damage to an enemy. And we do have a fair number of physical resources in here, nothing, too big. We also have lock and load, by the way, on the player side schemes. So might as well mention those right now. We have build support, which has a very specific purpose here. And then we have lock and load, which when this is defeated, so it'll have 2 threat on it, and it costs 1 to get out. And then you can search your deck, and each player may search their deck and discard pile for a weapon upgrade with a cost of 3 or less and put it into play. So that also helps us to get those out more easily. And then, but the specific purpose of build support, which is relevant to Yarnbjorn here, is that's meant to get Quinn Carrier out. So if we look at Quinn Carrier, it has a cost of 3, and it's a support, Avenger, and Vehicle, but you can play it only if your identity has the Avenger trait. Silk does not have the Avenger trait. She's a Web Warrior. So you cannot play Quinn Carrier at all. So build support is meant to get Quinn Carrier into play. And so once you have that into play, it's then a resource generator, exhaust Quinn Carrier, generate a wild resource, which of course would count for Yarnbjorn here. So it could be a resource that you pay after you attack either with your hero, right? Specifically your hero's attack, basic attack, or any of the event attacks, which we now have 6 of, right? Because we have 3 of our firepower and 3 of the swinging silk kicks. And so you can then spend a physical resource and deal 2 damage to an enemy. And this one also is damage that is not considered to be an attack. So you don't have to worry about retaliate with this either. In addition, so some of the other benefits, one other benefit of these cards is Plasma Pistol. It does have 3 charges on here, so you can use 1 or 2 of those charges and still be able to keep Plasma Pistol out and deal a damage to an enemy. So I tended to do that. I usually used, right away, if there was a tough to get rid of or an extra point of damage that I needed on an enemy, I made sure to use Plasma Pistol. Or if I got it out late in the game, I would just use it automatically because the goal is to, finish off the villain. All right, so let's look at the other cards that are also really nice in this deck. So for sure, Spider-Woman, great card in any Web Warrior deck. So it's a 3 cost, 2 attack and 1 thwart, 3 health. Shield and Web Warrior traits. Has this response after a Web Warrior ally, including this one, enters play. Deal 1 damage to an enemy. So we have a decent number of Web Warriors in the deck. We'll point those out in just a little bit. But each time one of them comes into play, then you deal 1 damage to an enemy. So that would include Ghost Spider, Spider, right? SP//DR. So Spider, who is a real all-star in this. I'll come back to her in a sec. Spider-Man, Peter Parker, always really nice to include for readying your other Web Warriors. And Spider-Man Otto Octavius. So I wanted to come back to Spider specifically here. So it has 1 attack and 2 thwart and 2 consequential on that thwart and 2 health. So Spider can always be a great card for using again and again, playing again and again, but in this even more so. So play only if you control Web Warrior card. When defeated, add Spider to your hand if she was defeated by taking excess consequential damage. So typically what one would do, since she only has 2 health, is you would attack for 1 point when Spider first comes out, and then your next turn you would thwart for 2, and then she'd go back into your hand. And then of course, if you have Web of Life and Destiny out already, which you can play for free since at least when Silk is on her Web Warrior side or hero side, then after a Web Warrior ally leaves play, choose a player. That player draws a card. So then Spider come back to your hand, and you also draw a card, get a chance to play her again. So that's always a valuable cycle in Web Warrior decks, but even more so with Spider-Woman in play, because it also then you deal damage as soon as Spider enters play, and of course any of the other Web Warriors enter play as well. All right, so a couple of other important cards in here are some card draw cards. I've mentioned before in a previous video that I've been trying to cut back on Nick Fury, but if I have certain things I want to accomplish, I am not going to throw away card draw. So in this deck, we have Moon Girl, right? So Silk is a genius on her alter ego side, so that allows us to play Moon Girl to possibly draw up to 3 cards. Nick Fury can help us draw 3 cards. And of course, if the Web of Life and Destiny is out, any of these other Web Warrior cards can help us draw cards. We have Ingenuity in the deck, also because we're in Ingenuity, so we can generate a mental resource as well. And then with the other parts of a card draw we have is Face the Past, right? So that can search your encounter deck, discard pile, set aside areas, right? So it's a 0-cost event. Ready your hero and draw 3 cards. You can't attack the villain that phase, and then you remove this from the game. So, but helps. So the whole purpose really in making sure to have that extra card draw. Oh, and of course, we have Albert Moon, who doesn't draw cards, but allows you to tuck a card under Cindy Moon, and then she can draw her cards. So as a reminder, and just in case somebody just isn't familiar with Silk, so real quickly, let's look at her abilities. So that's going to be important for this last part about the tucked cards. Let's look at her alter ego ability first. So first of all, she has 3 recovery, 10 hit points, hand size of 6, and she can tuck up to 4 cards. If she gets any extra cards, she's got to remove a card until she's down to 4. And it has an action: discard a tucked card here, draw 2 cards, right? So essentially, Albert Moon, so he can either tuck the top card of the encounter deck under Cindy Moon, or heal 1 damage from Cindy Moon for each tucked card under her. Most of the time I'm going to use the top one because it's to help facilitate her drawing 2 cards, right? So those are all elements of card draw, and that is why Professor X, who, if played, right, 3-cost ally, if Professor X is played, he can confuse the villain. So that's Professor X's point of being in the deck, is so that we can have a chance to get over to alter ego at least once in a while. I didn't go to alter ego as much as I often do in Silk decks, but did want it to be able to have that chance for it to pay off. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and look at the results of from this deck here. So first of all, the villains tested against were Claw, and I have my usual expert house rule. Let me just scroll down to that. You can always pause to read. I'm not going to read it every time. So you can pause this to see what my expert house rule is to make expert more regularly challenging. So you could read that and pause if you want to. So let me head back up. All right. So we have Thunderbolts. So that was new. That's the villain is Citizen V, but the encounter deck is Thunderbolts. And then the 2 Thunderbolt minions that I had. So when you're playing solo, you would have 2 Thunderbolt minions in the deck, or to face against, excuse me. And so one of them is Songbird, whose encounter set is called Hard Sound, and the other one is Moonstone, whose encounter set is called Gravitational Pull. Okay? And then after that, Magneto. So Thunderbolts was / Citizen V was my new villain for this round, so replace the one that I had before this. All right. So, notice, once again, undefeated. So a lot of my plays have been undefeated with Silk, but not, against all the villains, but not all of them. But this is, a really nice deck for controlling things. These extra abilities of these weapon upgrades make them so they're useful even before we're able to use firepower. So they're really nice for kind of plinking off getting some damage onto minions, keeping things under control real easily, doing some extra damage to the villain to get to the final villain stage faster, and then powering through the villain very quickly at the end. So because, normally you end up waiting for a swinging Silk Kick to get into your hand so you can do a bunch of damage, right? 7 or possibly 9 damage to the villain in your final attack, because you can do some really big burst damage. And another reason, of course, for why you do want to have a lot of card draw in her decks in general. But with firepower, as soon as you have 2 or 3 of these weapon upgrades out, firepower can do 6 or 9 damage. So, and especially if you have 3 of them out, you can do 9 damage, which is just as much. So for 1 cost, which is just as much as a swinging Silk Kick can deal. And even the 6 damage for 1 cost is, nothing to, scoff at. So it's very powerful, a lot of damage, and I felt like I just didn't have to wait long to really just go after the villain and finish him off once things were set up. All right. So a couple of things here. Did have some deck refinements as we went. Originally I had Psylocke in the deck in order to have some more chances to confuse the villain. But with her expense and the importance of all the other cards in the deck, I just didn't play her much. I did play her once or twice, I think, in the first 6 games. But eventually I saw that she just wasn't really necessary, and I wasn't really going down to alter ego as much, like I said, as I often do with Silk. And then I also had Pulse Grenade because I wanted to have 4 weapons out, but I found I was really just cluttering the deck a bit too much between these extra upgrades and then not being able to play Firepower really until I got those upgrades out. So I've decided it wasn't necessary. I did end up, when I had it in the deck, I did end up doing really a lot of damage, up to 32 points of damage, because I would play this on that final turn, but it was really overkill. It was more damage than I needed on my final turn, and so it wasn't necessary for the extra damage either. And then I also had Assault Training, which allows you an alter ego action. It has 2 uses. Exhaust this card and remove 1 training counter from it. Choose an aggression, which is a red card event from your discard pile, and shuffle it into your deck. So I originally had it in there so I could shuffle the Firepowers back into the deck, but it just wasn't really necessary. So instead, that brought the deck down to 42 cards. So I had a lot of cards in there to begin with, 45. So really cleaned up the deck and just made it more efficient. No extra additions. And I did want to mention, after I was done playing, potential other removals that I could see other people wanting to do is I did have 2 first aids, which I don't even remember mentioning. So I had 2 first aids in here, and the purpose of them was to either use on Spider-Woman or Spider-Man Peter Parker in order to keep them in play. And they did work for that. But when it came down to it, I could see where a person could determine that first aid wasn't really needed. But it is something I do like to do. But I did find that with all the card draw and being able to use Firepower and all that, I didn't really need Spider-Woman to stay out all the time. And with Yarnbjorn being able to do extra damage too, I didn't really need Spider-Woman to stay out all the time, or Peter Parker. So first aid, I could see cutting that if somebody wanted just a clean 40 cards. Okay. All right. So those were the deck refinements and potential other removals. If somebody wanted to remove first aid, I could definitely see that. Okay. Other notable elements of play, we already mentioned about Firepower and the weapons. We mentioned about the allies. Yep, we pretty much got that covered. And then we mentioned that Queen Carrier cannot be played. So fun deck. Loved being able to push the damage more with this deck and be able to have that burst damage again at the end of the game, but more accessible burst damage than Silk normally has. So I do recommend trying either this deck or something like it. Hopefully it inspires you one way or the other, and have a good one. So be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. And I love reading people's and responding to people's comments in the comment section. So feel free to comment there if you'd like. All right. Have a great one, everybody.